And welcome to a new edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns in our St. Louis Sports Page studio here on a rare day, Monday. Normally, we don't do a podcast on Monday, but Mike, we figured this was the day to do it because it's one of only 2 days off for the Cardinals in the month of June. Going to be a crazy month of baseball.
Not a lot of off days and a lot of home games.
16, I think, in the month of June, but 29 of the next 30 days, starting on Tuesday night when the Cardinals open the 9-game homestand against the Royals at Busch Stadium. The Cardinals will be playing a baseball game on 29 of the next 30 days up until July the 3rd. So it's going to be I think, a telling month for the Cardinals for a lot of reasons. Mike, you and I both talked about how you're counting down, now 2 months away, just under 2 months away from the trading deadline. I think where the Cardinals sit in this division on the morning of July 3rd is going to have a lot to do with what moves this club's going to make toward the end of the month.
This is a very important month for the Cardinals. Yes, very much so. And a lot of home games, right? So this team has played better at home than on the road. So they need to take advantage of that and just put their best foot forward, because I think on July 1st, where this team stands will determine if they're going to really be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline.
And I think too, I don't know. It's going to be hard to say because obviously if you have a 20-9 month again or whatever, and then you're probably going to be in first place and things will change a little bit. But if they just are hanging around 3 or 4 games out of 500, I think they've got to go back to what their original plan was at the start of the season. And this is going to be a transition year. And if you somehow luck into a wild card playoff spot or luck into winning the division with 85 wins or something, then that's great. But I don't think it can really deviate from what your original plan was of seeing what you had in the young players and I would say selling more than buying at this point in my mind.
If you look at the record at the end of the month here on July 1st, so 1 month from today, and they're in the same spot, 3 or 4 games back in second place in the division, do you really think it should be a dump everybody and reset type thing?
I wouldn't say dump everybody, but I would say if you've got guys that you can replace, if you've got guys that are potentially going to be free agents, or else other guys that you are not expecting back on your ball club in 2026, I think you see what you can get for them. And I think if you can make a move that's going to help your ball club, not necessarily help you as much in 2025, but help you in 2026 and beyond, I think it's something you certainly have to consider.
I think the hard part about this team right now is the guys that you think or you want to be trade candidates, the guys that may have more money on their contract or less time, are the guys that aren't actually playing as well right now.
That's true too.
I think that's the challenge.
I was going to say that may be the challenge. Yeah, there may be guys you want to trade, but when nobody else wants them.
I mean, look at the Nolan Arenado situation, right? Mm-hmm. He was one of the guys you needed to trade to make this reset happen. Well, that didn't happen. There weren't a lot of guys wanting him, and right now he's batting 6th in this lineup and not really – I mean, it's not that he's playing terrible, but he's also not playing as well as some of the others. So is there someone out there that's going to want a player like him at that salary, or is there someone out there that's going to give the return to the Cardinals the way they want it to be when he's not playing as well as he can?
Yeah, more than likely the players that the other teams are going to want are going to be players the Cardinals are not willing to trade unless it's a massive blockbuster deal, which in the middle of the season you don't really expect that. Yeah, the thing about Arenado too is that we all talked about this all winter with him holding the no trade clause and him only given a very limited amount of teams that he's willing to go to. That may even be less teams at the trading deadline than it was in the winter, because he's going to see who's where in the race and who he thinks he might be able to go to that would have a chance to get to the World Series. And that may not be more than a couple clubs, and they may not be interested.
And the other guy that you flip back and forth on is Ryan Helsley, because he's a guy who can have good trade, bait if he's playing well. But on a young team, it could be good to have a solid closer at the back end of that bullpen that's really good and locked in. But he hasn't been that solid locked in guy so far yet. That's not to say that he can't be. He just hasn't been as good as he's capable.
I think he's a guy that is really key over this next month. Both how he's pitching will determine a lot about what's happening with the ball club. If he's getting a lot of regular work, that means the Cardinals are ahead by 1 or 2 or 3 runs in the 9th inning in a lot of ball games. And I think I think I'm willing to give him a pass on what's happened so far in the first couple months of this season, simply because of the way I think he's been used, has been so inconsistent. And that's not necessarily his fault. That's the Cardinals' strategy of only pitching him in a save situation, and they hit. Sometimes they went a week without having one of those, and that doesn't mean they were losing. It just meant they weren't in a safe situation. So if he can get regular work in the month of June, I think that there's going to be a lot of teams barking on the Cardinals' door to talk about him at the end of July. And to me, if you don't have a deal done with him before the end of July, if you're the Cardinals, I'd move him because I just don't see him getting the. I think he's going to get more money on the free agent market than the Cardinals are going to be willing to pay for a closer. It's just what if you
The
look at
only
the track
way,
record, that's what they expect.
in my opinion, the only way that I trade Ryan Helsley is if I can package a player with him that we're trying to get rid of,
That's true.
i.e., a Eric Fetty or Andre Palante, somebody like that isn't a long-term projected starter that not a lot of guys are going to want individually, but can we dump them with him to say you need to take him?
Or at least individually, they're not going to give you as much back in exchange because those are
Correct.
guys that are free agents into the area.
And I think that's where some of these guys, not necessarily from a trade standpoint, but if you want to hit this reset, getting rid of Eric Fetty to make way for Michael McGreevy or Gordon Graceffo may be better than a trade. And I know we've heard Mo say this before. Hey, getting guys back and healthy, it's like we made a trade. Well, I don't know that we need to make a trade when I think we've got candidates down there that are probably better or project to be a long-term better player than.
Well, and speaking specifically about pitching, which is where the Cardinals have the most potential free agents here, like 4 or 5 that could be free agents at the end of the season if you add them all up. You've got a couple of guys that are basically your top 2 pitching prospects in the organization, Quinn Matthews and Tink Hence, who haven't pitched hardly at all. Tink hasn't pitched at all this season because he's only made now a couple of rehab starts, but he has started to come back. He was supposed to pitch on with Sunday for Palm Beach, and that game got rained out. So he made a start instead for the Complex League team on Monday, the day we're taping this broadcast. That's a second rehab start. Quinn Matthews has made a couple of rehab starts and then actually pitched for Memphis over the weekend, his first start back in the AAA club in a month. So if you've got a month, we talk about June being an important month for the Major League Ball Club. I think it's an important month for some of those guys as well. Matthews, Tink Hence, Tekoa Roby, who's still at AA Springfield, but has pitched really well all season. And we've seen other guys who have made the jump directly from AA to the big league. So I think you've got 3 guys right there that I really want to keep an eye on over the month of June to see how they're pitching, because that could also dictate what moves Cardinals might make at the deadline.
And I think, too, when you look at pitching particularly, I think you need a veteran somewhere on the starting staff to be able to groom some of these young guys through. And to me, that guy is Sonny Gray. So I think he's the one guy on this starting staff right now that I don't think I would trade or want to move anywhere, because I want, especially when you watch Sonny, his craft and the way he goes about it, he knows what he wants to call. And not that he's not letting Pages or Herrera call the game. I think he's helping teach the catchers too a little bit more about it. So he's the guy that I want to groom some of the young guys pitching. To me, I think it's a really important month to watch Eric Fetty, Andre Palante, and Miles Michaelis, because those are the 3 that are kind of blocking the way for the Tink Hence, Gordon Graceffo, Quinn Matthews, Michael McGreevy. Those are the 3, in my opinion, that are blocking that spot right now. Because we know that Libby's going to still be here, right? He's not. Right. He's still learning, but he's still young, and so he's not going anywhere to as we work through this rotation and staff. And he's been one of the best consistent pitchers we've had all year.
Right. No, I don't think. I think you're going to keep Gray, and I think Gray is also like Arenado in a sense, even though he's a little different category because of his need on this ball club. But I think there's probably only 2 or 3 clubs that he would agree to go to trade, be traded to at this point. Maybe that list would widen out a little bit over the winter if you don't, make some other moves to get this club better the rest of the season. Maybe he'd be willing to revisit that no trade clause over the winter. But yeah, I'd be stunned if he was involved in a trade at this point of the season. Let's look a little deeper dive into this start of the month of June with this homestand, 9-game homestand. First the 3 games against the Royals, then followed by 3 big games against the Dodgers, 3 more games against the Toronto Blue Jays on this 9-game homestand that starts on Tuesday. The Dodgers in particular of the weekend, I know the fans' interest is going to be high in that series. I think they are expecting big crowds all 3 days. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. Mr. Ohtani and company come to town. But it's almost amazing what the Dodgers have done to this point in the season when you look at the fact that they have 15 pitchers on the injured list. We talk about, the Cardinals having some issues with their pitching depth. 15 guys they've got on the injured list. And that's just the pitching staff.
It's a lot.
And they're still in first place. And one of the best teams in baseball.
They're also paying more money than anybody else out there. So I think that makes it
certainly paying a lot more money to guys on the injured list than anybody else.
And now they got Clayton Kershaw back. and Kershaw back and starting to pitch again is helpful for them. So to me, when I look at this homestand, the Dodgers are the team you say, like, okay, you're probably going to struggle with them, but if you find a way to take one, great. So to me, you got to look at the 3 against the Royals and 3 against the Blue Jays. Those are the ones you got to win the homestand. And that's the important, that at the end of the day, win the homestand, right? That's the important part. So let's say you get swept by the Dodgers. Well, then you need to pick up 5 wins in the other 9 games.
Right. Yeah. If you want to stay kind of where you are,
you want to stay where you're at.
At least 6, 7 games over 500.
After that 9-game homestand, you go to 4 games again at Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's just won 7, 8 in a row right now.
Right.
So they're creeping right back up there, a game behind us right now in the standings. So those games are going to become really important.
And then, of course, this month also finally includes the first 4 games of the season against the Cubs, starting June 22nd at Busch Stadium. So those will be obviously big ball games as well.
And that homestand has the 3 with the Reds right before it. So
Correct.
You've got, what is that? 4, 8, 11 games against divisional opponents here in this month. So that's going to make or break the difference too of where you see this team fitting, right? And so
actually, it's more than that because you got a few with the Pirates after that. After this, at the end of the month, they go back to Pittsburgh. So yeah, it's like half the month almost is divisional play finally, which is about time that happens. So,
but of course, that's where your starting pitching is really going to make a difference, because when you look at the Dodgers, their pitching has been okay, but their offense is constantly coming through. The Cardinals on the other side are a little bit younger, so their offense is not as consistent as the Dodgers. So
I was going to bring that up in a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's where like the age factor comes into it, and why I think the starting pitching is so much more important right now to control the run game and to control how much they're giving up.
And I also think some point during this stretch here of a lot of ball games, you're going to see Steven Matz back in the rotation in some form of a 6-man rotation as they try to give those other starters, a little bit more of a regular rest. And again, he's pitched really well in that role. I don't know exactly when that Cardinals will make that switch. Probably maybe in the Toronto series, but I think they're going to be at least a couple of starts in this month that you're going to see Steven Matz back in the rotation.
As we start to work through this month, the question also becomes, at some point, do you try to get other guys up here and in there if you are looking at trade possibilities? Mm-hmm. So do you try to give some starts to some of these other guys to see what they can do? Or the other question I have is, how many more starts does it take for Palante and Fetty? Like, how many more do we want to give them before they just say, okay, it's not working out?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting call. I think Fetty was better on Sunday in the game in Texas. It was a kind of a lost weekend for the Cardinals, but they did manage to get the one win out of the weekend with the game that Sonny Gray pitched. They beat the Rangers 2-0 on Saturday. But elsewhere in that 3-game series, over the total course of the series, Cardinals outscored 19-4 by a club that really wasn't doing much offensively early on. So yeah, they did win 2 out of 3 in Baltimore, but then dropped the 2 out of 3 in Texas on that last road trip. But I think the Fetty goes 6 innings, only allows 2 runs. When he comes out of that ball game, they're only trailing 2-1 to Jacob deGrom. So he could say in a lot of ways he did his job in that ball game. But I think Palante is the guy to me that has really struggled the last few turns. I'm going to be curious to see. Is he pitching? I think he's pitching Tuesday night, right in the opener against Kansas City.
I think so, yes.
I think that'll be a big start for him.
And I think the tough part is when you look at the way Sonny's been pitching. This team is winning because Sonny's not giving up any runs. Well, Fetty only gave up 2, but we couldn't score. And that's where the inconsistency in this offense is coming through. And that's where I think starting pitching is even stronger and needs to be stronger than it has been.
10-2, the Cardinals are 10-2 in Sonny Gray's 12 starts this season. So that's a pretty good. And I think they won 5 in a row and 6 out of the last 7. So he's pitching like the number 1 starter that he's supposed to be.
And there's not a lot of guys you can look up and say you've had 10 strikeouts in 2 of your last 3 games.
No, they got to be very happy with how he's performed.
That's what we wanted from Sonny to start, right? And we talked about it. He had kind of a rough spring and kind of a slow start to the season, but we said we weren't worried. We thought Sonny was going to get to where he needs to be. And that's why, to me, he's such a huge key piece to this team. And I don't think he can be I wouldn't even include him anywhere on a trade possibility.
No, I don't think there's any chance. But you know, also look at the fact he's got a pretty hefty contract the next couple of years. It was backloaded, so it goes up pretty high, like what 30 or 35 million the next couple of seasons. So
But
that would probably scare away a lot of people too.
and you're going to balance it out by having younger players when that comes due, because you're not going to have Michaelis on the bill anymore,
Right.
and you're not going to have Arenado on the bill anymore, and some of these other guys that are costing a lot of money.
I think the only other two guys that are under contract, without looking it up, to just memory serves me correctly, the last only other two guys that are currently under contract. And I know there's younger guys that have team has control over who weren't going anywhere, but in terms of actually has a signed contract beyond this season, other than Gray, it's just Contreras and Arenado. I'm pretty sure that's the only other two guys that are signed beyond this season. So there is going to be some flexibility there as far as the payroll is concerned. Visit with Mike Raines, Rob Raines here, stlsportspage.com on our weekly Cardinal podcast, Raines on the Cardinals, brought to you as always by our friends at the Drury Hotels and all of our other great sponsors. You can get all of the content on Spotify and any other place that you find your YouTube, your normal podcast platforms. Subscribe to our free newsletter just by going to the website, stlsportspage.com. Don't want to miss all of our daily game reports, all the audio on all the home games as well from the post-game interviews, and then of course some features and columns coming up as well as we go through the month. Couple things, special things planned for the month, so you don't want to miss out on any of our free content. Of course, no paywall anywhere on the website, thanks to all of our great sponsors. And if you're traveling somewhere in the summer, making your travel summer plans, be sure to check out whether they have a Drury Hotel anywhere you're going. We're going to be heading out to North Carolina at the end of the month for a couple of days, Mike, and they have a Drury Hotel in Greensboro, North Carolina that we'll be checking out for the first time. Looking forward to that.
We will be. We'll be going out there to receive the award. Well, you will be receiving the award for the Missouri Sports Writer of the Year, and my brother for the Idaho Sports Writer of the Year. So it'll be a fun family trip at the same time.
Looking forward to that very much. So back to a little Cardinal talk here that you mentioned him earlier with Brendan Donovan. I think the problem with the Cardinal offense is you really only have a couple of guys right now in Donovan and Ivan Herrera, who I think you can consistently count to be there on every given night. I mean, I know some nights, Newbar has a good game. Some nights Mason Wynn has a good game. But I just think that, like you mentioned, the consistency is what's bothering this offense. Donovan hitting 323 now is third in the National League. Freddie Freeman and Will Smith of the Dodgers, both are the only two guys ahead of him. Tied with Trey Turner of the Phillies with 70 hits, the most in the league, as he's on a pace for 200 hits. But definitely trending like he's going to be an all-star and just having a terrific season. But they need some other guys to do it too.
Yeah, and this offense was playing really well through that stretch where they won a bunch and were winning a lot. Now it doesn't seem to be doing that right now, right? So you look over the last 15 games, over the last 2 weeks, Victor Scott's hitting 229, Herrera 220, Nolan Arenado 150, Wilson Contreras 200. I mean, that's not going to get a lot done.
No. Yeah, so I think they've got to figure out a way to kind of get that offense in gear here. The only other kind of development over the weekend that we need to mention is Jordan Walker going on the IL, and I think that's an unfortunate injury, left wrist inflammation on the 10-day IL. They don't expect him to be out longer than that, and it was backdated by a couple of days, so might be back toward the end of this homestand. But he had actually looked like he finally was getting some production. I think had driven 11 runs in the last 11 games, hitting over 300. So just a shame that injury kind of knocked him down right when he was maybe kind of starting to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah, it really is a shame because it looked like he was starting to come through with some pretty big clutch hits and clutch situations here. And it's an interesting time because the way he'd been playing, you wanted him out there every day. Well, now, does that open the door to fit in somebody like Nolan Gorman in the DH spot if Burleson can play right field? So, does that start to work Gorman back into some of these at-bats that we've been saying he needs to start getting somewhere? And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how they fill this lineup over the next 10 days while Walker's out.
Of course, you also could play Donovan in left and move Newbar to right and play Gorman at second base as an option too if you still wanted to DH Herrera, and you also got Burleson in the mix. So I think the one guy who's going to definitely get more at bats over the next couple of weeks while Walker out, 10 days while Walker out, it will be Burleson. Whether he's playing in the outfield or DHing, is going to probably be his primary role. He can also play first base if you wanted to DH Contreras. So got a few options there with him, and he's hit pretty well too. So. Yeah, it's still a juggling act. It's been a juggling act all along so far, the first third of the season, but I don't think that's going to go away. It's still going to be a juggling act, but the guy that I think is going to struggle to get the consistent at bats is Nolan Gorman.
And I think that, the question becomes too is what do they want to do with Ivan Herrera? Do they want to DH him or do they want to catch him? And I think that becomes where Gorman's at bats are going away, right? If you want, because right now, honestly, Pages is probably hitting better than Gorman is. Now, that's because Pages is getting consistent at bats, right?
And how do you expect Gorman to hit when he doesn't play?
I don't disagree with that thought, but it's just saying, so the question becomes, do you worry about the run game? So you want Pages defensively behind the plate, or do you want Herrera catching and hitting so that Gorman can DH? That's the question that needs to be answered.
I think it's probably going to be a matchup thing like we've talked about before. If you've got a team that doesn't steal very many bases, then maybe you're safe with going with Herrera for a game or two behind the plate. But if you've got a club that runs a lot, the Royals run a lot, we all know the Dodgers can do everything. So I think you're not going to see Herrera behind the plate against the Dodgers. So I think you're going to see an awful lot of Pedro Pages the next week behind the plate.
I think you're going to see a lot of Pages this whole month, honestly, if you're looking at this roster, because the Brewers run a lot. The Blue Jays have some speed on those guys.
Reds run a lot.
The Reds run a lot. So I think, the question is going to be, where does Gorman get at bats?
He's going to get a few pinch hit at bats like he did on Sunday. He's going to get maybe a game or two at DH. Maybe he'll get a game at third base if you want to give Arenado a day off or let him DH for a game. Maybe get a game at second base here if you shift the outfield around a little bit. So it's going to just have to be that mix and match game that's going to have to happen. So give me a prediction. What do you think as we start this tough month of June here? What are the Cardinals right now? 7 games over 500? 6 games over 500? I don't even have the standings in front of me. You're the computer whiz.
Pulling it up right now. Let's see where we're at. We're 33-26.
All right, so 7 games over 500. Are they going to be more or less at the end of June? Let's say July 3rd, after this month, a month here, after the games of July 2nd, a month from now. Are they going to be better than 7 games over 500 or less than 7 games over 500?
So the question basically becomes: are they going to play 500 baseball for this month or better,
or worse?
Or worse. I don't see them playing worse as long as the offense can find a way to come through. And I think a lot of that relies too on Palante's next start. And tomorrow we'll see that, right? I think you got to get out and jump. You're playing a Royals team that offensively hasn't jumped out to a big, lead either, right? So, and then you got 3 games against the White Sox in there who are not good, and you got to find a way to win those too. So the challenge is,
can we schedule the Rockies anytime soon in that game series?
Yeah. But the challenge is the 4 against the Dodgers, the 4 against the Brewers, and the 4 against the Cubs. So that's 12 games right there out of how many in this month? I didn't do the math on that, but
29, right?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So you basically
count the 2 at the start of July. Yeah.
You got to win the majority of every other game, with the exception of 3 in order to go above 500. Can they do that?
Yeah. So an interesting challenge. And I do think you're going to get a good.
I was just going to say, I think they can. If I had to look at this at 29 games, I would say that we finished the month at
more than 7 games over 500.
I'd say we finished the month, we're 8 games over 500.
Yep, fair enough. I think it very well could be right. I think the fact that they have 16 of the games at home is a plus because we know they played well at home. I think the crowds will be better for a couple of reasons. One, they're playing better at home. You got a couple of attractive teams coming in with the Dodgers and the Cubs. Are going to be good crowds. And if they're playing well, school's out, summer's in play. People making plans for trips coming in from out of town. So I think you're going to be seeing a regular dose of 35,000 plus fans at the ballpark. And if the team's playing well, it'll be an exciting place to be.
And the team has talked about how much the fans help them, right? And so having a big crowd at home is going to mean a lot to them. And so with 16 of these games at home, and hopefully they can get the 35,000 plus, it's going to be nice.
It'll be an exciting time. Of course, we'll have it all covered for you here on stlsportspage.com. In addition to our weekly Reigns on the Cardinals podcast, we'll have some features coming up. Well, I want to mention, of course, that other news that happened while since we were away over the weekend was that Joshua Baez got promoted. We talked about him on this podcast a little bit, as well as a story about him a few weeks ago. And he was in Peoria, former second-round draft pick. The Cardinals got promoted to Springfield and is off and rolling down there. So that's an exciting guy to watch too as the months goes along. And we're getting ever closer to the Major League Baseball baseball draft coming up. Started the All-Star break. Cardinals with the 5th overall pick. They're going to hear a lot more about what's coming up with that as well. So we'll have all the Cardinal news covered for you, as well as the daily game reports and the post-game interviews here on STLSportsPage.com. Mike, thanks for the visit. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Rob Ranger.